bit about Nick. He's a product manager who finds interesting use cases and problems to tackle. He's been thrown into difficult situations where adaptability and thinking from first principles are crucial for survival. This includes time at Adobe launching a redesigned support forum or building a new web experience for a freelancer marketplace product at Coder. He focuses on customers' needs to truly build functional products that are used by the masses. Areas of expertise include these verticals: marketplaces, education, and recruiting. And currently, he's a senior product manager at Amazon, building a sustainable shopping experience for B2B customers in the Amazon business area. So thank you so much, Nick. Take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Marion, for giving that nice intro there. So good morning, everyone. I'll just kind of quickly do a light intro throughout the presentation, but I'm Nick, and today I want to focus and kind of teach this group here today on how to become a better influencer, if you will, in your workplace. Whether that is a product manager or another type of business function, I think it's important to write effective product strategies to communicate your ideas, make a solid case, and potentially drive new business opportunities for any verticals or product areas that you are owning. So I think it's a valid topic. Definitely, it's one that will come up as you start progressing in, let's say, your career path as a PM, where you become more seasoned, more of an expert. You will need to be able to draft strategies and come up with, the right logic and the reasoning behind your strategy. So with that, kind of the key contents I would like to go through today are: one, kind of reviewing our sponsors today. We'll go through what is a product strategy and some of the key elements around when to do it, who needs to do it. It also could depend on org structure, so we'll go through that. We'll then structure your strategy. So again, break down the different components of what is included in the strategy. And then I want to go through a sample strategy in a kind of marketplace environment, and it's more B2B centered so that we understand how to kind of formulate one. And again, you can definitely take a lot of these examples into your current situations, adapt it, and then be able to not only, impress your boss and manager, but more importantly, be able to kind of distill your ideas clearly and again, build the right thing for your customers. And then we'll do some key takeaways at the end, some themes and some hiring kind of announcements here and there. So with that, we do want to, say thanks to the sponsors and thank you for all the volunteers that have made this event possible today. Pragmatic Institute and Institute Sequent Learning Product Camp, right? Without these sponsors, we wouldn't be able to meet today. So if you have a chance, go to their booths or go email them and thank them, for organizing this. Lots of good things that have happened, I think, in this conference throughout the US, since it's part of a larger group. And this is actually my second year doing a talk with Product Camp. So definitely like this group. With that, let's talk about, who I am just real briefly, so you understand a bit more about kind of my background and how the thinking to this, I guess, presentation will form around the strategy side. So as Marianne was saying, right, my key areas of interest are: one, marketplaces, education, and then recruitment. When it comes to marketplaces, right, the key things that I've worked on in the past was more of a kind of startup area where we focus on building a freelancer enterprise experience, if you will. That was a startup environment, making a strategy in that versus a corporate environment, much like with Amazon, two completely different beasts. However, the same thinking and the same foundations apply to both. Also, kind of one of my more recent roles that I transitioned out of was in a data space at Dun & Bradstreet, where it was more of a transactional data environment. So we were selling data and essentially building business models around that. So I can also talk a little bit about transactions or business model on the transactional side of things. Some side hobbies: I really love to row here in the city of Austin, Texas. This is something that I've been actually turning into more of a hobby and actually almost like a part-time job, if you will, just with all the competitions that keep happening around the clock here in the US. But it's really fun, exciting. And I think if you can find a great hobby that kind of complements your career in some way, and in my case, rowing is kind of involving a lot of teamwork, a lot of camaraderie, and there's actually a lot of leadership, I think, that goes into this sport. It can kind of help you, I think, in your job, and it definitely does for me. So can't highly recommend rowing and any other sports out there if that's your thing. So with that, let's jump right into it, right? What is a product strategy, right? So before we dive deep into this question, you need to understand where it fits into, I guess you could say, the hierarchy of all I guess you could say, the different briefs that a company needs to have. And what I mean by briefs is that there are different sequences and different briefs that you kind of need to own, in that a company has a vision at the highest level. You have a company level strategy, you have product strategy, then you have your roadmap, and then you have goals, right? Typically, product strategy fits in the middle of this, and we'll focus on that kind of little sliver for this section of the talk. But it's important to note that your company is going to have a higher level vision where it's trying to get to in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So it's important to know how your company is planning to, change the world in some way or another. So that way you can align your product strategy and your company strategy to that, right? The next step would be a company strategy, meaning I would think that's more along the lines of culture and the type of culture your company is looking to build and instill in their employees. A good example of this right now, for example, with Amazon, is that they have leadership principles. There's about 15 or so of them. They're trying to make sure every employee that joins the company has and exudes those 15 leadership principles. So that way everybody is in sync. That's kind of part of your company DNA, if you will. And that's how it's going to, this company DNA is then going to help the company get closer to that vision, right? And then when we talk about product strategy would be something, I think, short term or in the near term, in that now you're going to be building certain products and you need to kind of figure out, well, is it aligned with my, culture and company, the way we do business? But then does it also align with the vision of what we're trying to do next in the next 20, 30, 40 years, right? Where are we trying to take our customers to? What is that North Star? And then once you get down to more roadmap and goals, this becomes more tactical in nature. So roadmaps, very tactical. It's all about execution to deliver on that strategy. So first things first would be, you would create a strategy, then you would create a roadmap to get and achieve that strategy to hit some type of goals or numbers. So goals would be the last input here, which would be a measurement of that product strategy. So again, that kind of gives you a highlight as to how to think about it. And so as a PM, you're going to be, for the most part, owning product strategy, roadmap, and even goals. And then sometimes you might have influence on the company strategy if you are relatively, new into the startup. I guess if there's less than 10 folks, or if you're one of the founders, you'd want to figure out how to incorporate that and influence it, if you will. But for this talk, let's focus on product strategy and what that looks like. So let's talk about who builds a strategy. Typically, it can be bottoms up or it can be top down. When I say bottoms up, that means the product manager themselves will be owning the strategy, figuring out the direction of where this product needs to go. And again, you will need to talk with multiple stakeholders and partners on your team to make sure you are kind of building something cohesive. You've involved everybody, because this is an exercise that does involve quite a lot of buy-in from others. This is not something that you can do in a silo. You need to involve others. And then bottom up is one way, and some companies like that approach, right? Meaning some corporations, my previous roles, they like when PMs bring and surface new ideas and new strategies. So that way leadership can then vet. But sometimes other companies, they have a more top-down approach, meaning leadership wants to do this, new product area because they want to be more competitive. And so that leadership strategy is going to trickle down to the different product groups. And then it's up to the PM to kind of figure out how to execute on it, build the right roadmap. So those are typically the two avenues there for who builds a strategy. Now, another key question that's important is when you want to build one, right? And I think there are three key components here for this. One could be just new initiatives that your company and team is looking to drive. It could be part of your normal planning, process at the company or at your startup. So we would call that strategic planning cycles. And another one could just be for course correction, and you want more alignment with the company, meaning the current strategy, for example, might not be working as planned. And so what you want to do is course correct and try to adjust things. So that way you're on track to hitting, again, your goals, your numbers, and potentially going closer and achieving your vision. Going back to the new initiatives, though. So new initiatives, reasons why you would want to build a new strategy around a new initiative is that A, you've discovered new insights in the market. You've done some, let's say, user research, you've looked at some quantitative data, you've analyzed certain things, and you're noticing a gap in the product that you are building. And so is the gap something that can benefit the company? Can it also benefit the customer? Primarily, it should actually just benefit the customer, and secondary in nature, it'll benefit the company if you solve their problems and needs. but that's how you kind of think about it. Figure out what are the gaps currently between the problems that your customers are experiencing, if it's large enough, and if you have a lot of insights, both qualitative, again, through different user research, talking with the customer, and quantitative. If you have a good data set to play with, you can make a case. That's typically when you want to build a strategy, and then from there, inform leadership. To the second point here, right, on strategic planning cycles, normally companies typically plan, I would say 6 months to maybe even a year out in terms of when to build and what to build actually for the up and coming year. Normally, if it's a cyclical thing, you can kind of get ready and get ahead of the curve to build and get the right anecdotes, meaning listen to the right customer feedback, listen to what the data is saying, and then also listen to the gaps that you currently have from what the customers are kind of experiencing. And then from there, you can kind of build a strategy of, hey, for my up and coming year, I like to focus on education and I like to focus on retention as my two themes. Now, why do I want to do this? Because these are the gaps, and kind of list out more of the strategy there. So I would say typically large companies have their own planning cycles. If you're a startup, things will be a bit more iterative and quicker, I would say. With that, who is the strategy for, right? Multiple stakeholders, as I mentioned. Typically, PMs and leadership are going to be the ones that really digest this information. They're also going to be the ones that own the strategy. So PMs will own it, share it, and they'll need some type of alignment with their partner teams. In this case, it'll be the three main partner teams: engineering, UX, and product. Now, there could be secondary teams. For example, there could be marketing, there could be sales, there could be legal, right? And then I think a slew of others. At least in my current role at Amazon, there's about 15 plus 20 different teams that I would need to interface with. Some of them are similar in functions, meaning, there might be 4 or 5 different partner teams for marketing that I might need to interface with, right? Because Amazon is quite large. There's different touch points within the product. And so I might need to interface with all of them just to make sure that they're aware of what we are trying to do, and if they're aligned. So again, depending on how big the company you're at. And lastly, a strategy is very good for getting alignment. And this is going to be important when you do, let's say you finish your strategy, you have your first draft, right? You'd want to showcase it and share it with your go-to-market teams. Reason for this is that if you're going to be trying to hit your goals, which again is going to measure how effective your strategy is, you need to talk with those teams to then understand if they can actually achieve those goals. So a good example of this is if I'm going to be launching, let's say, a new widget on my website, and I need the email campaigning team to, let's say, send out X number of emails in order to lead to this number of conversion. I need to get alignment from my team to make sure they have the budget to send those emails, they have the resources, the team, everything in place, and plan for that certain time in order to then show my strategy that it has legs and this is what we track, right? If it, let's say, doesn't work, that's besides the point. The point is you want to get alignment with them earlier, make sure you get some sort of commitment, if you will. And again, commitments are kind of a bigger thing if you're more in the corporate space, a little bit larger company, of course. In a startup, it's all, I think you just have to kind of go, make sure you have a strategy, execute it, learn. If it works, great, keep executing, try different channels. If it's not, you got to, play with it a little. So with that, now we kind of know a little bit about product strategy. I want to kind of go deeper into the different areas, right? There's about a few different components that are key in any product strategy and kind of narrative in which you want to share with your team. And so let's kind of focus on what those elements are. 1, it's about the problem. 2, it's the target segment. 3, value proposition. 4, competitive advantage. 5, pricing. And 6, channel strategy, right? So in each of these, we'll go into more details, give some examples, but problem theme really focused in on what are those key buckets that are impacting your customers. They're the most important actions, let's say, and frustrations that they're experiencing because they can't do something in your product, or they just are experiencing something with another competitor that is not solving their need, but maybe you can solve it, but you figured out what this insight is. That's the problem. The target segment is what are those specific segments, or what does, let's say, the criteria of your customer look like, the ones that have this problem, right? You need to kind of focus on those segments that are experiencing the problem. You don't want to build something for an audience that doesn't have a problem, right? So you got to focus in on that. And now when you bring in value proposition, right, that's about, well, what value will this solution bring to the customer, right? Does your product and solution actually solve the problem in that target space? If it does, great. We want to hear that in the strategy. With regards to competitive advantage, right? Does your solution stand out from the crowd? Is there already something out there in the market? How can you compete? We'll talk through that. Pricing is a big one. So again, every strategy should have some sort of monetization in there or some way of tracking how it's going to be successful. Pricing is in there because it depends on the business model also of your team, right? We'll go through an example of around marketplaces and how pricing might impact that particular dynamic. But in any case, with pricing, you want to focus on either, depending on what your business is, whether it's transactional, whether it's a marketplace, or whether it's like more of a SaaS, if you will. So something of a subscription. So figure out what that model is and how, let's say, it can be used potentially to drive, let's say, solving the problem or the target space, target segment area. Now, if you're making a net new product or a net new strategy from the get-go, you will need to kind of think of what that business model is. If you're looking to improve upon an existing strategy, meaning there's already a business model in place, that's why I say it's somewhat applicable, maybe, maybe not. You might not need to worry about it, but it still might be important to focus on the other levers, right, in this exercise. So just something to keep in mind. And then lastly, with regards to channel, you need to kind of be able to focus in on where or who you want to target really. For your strategy, are you trying to get new customers, so acquisition? If that's the case, you need to kind of figure out what makes sense for B2C, what makes sense for B2B. If you are just wanting to target existing customers and kind of drive adoption and awareness, again, you're going to only focus on existing channels that you have, right? In B2B space, you might have a lot of your customers' emails. It might just make sense to launch like a Salesforce email campaign, for example. But again, you need to outline what that looks like and kind of who your partners will be to drive that. With that, let's talk about the problem themes. So some key things to think about when looking at the problem. One, don't focus on many, focus on one or two. Again, you start focusing on many, you're going to dilute, let's say, the strategy and potentially, create a product that doesn't resonate with the customer. So again, focus in on, singular or one or two problems. And again, I can't state this enough, but work backwards from what the customer experience should be. Meaning, customers, if you already are getting a good amount of feedback and you have a good feedback loop, listen to what they're saying and figure out what those themes are, right? You can kind of connect the dots. It's really easy once you have, let's say, even like 100 data set of different customer feedback coming in. You can start bucketing them into different areas. And then once you still might not, have the full answer, you could always get on a call with them. Or if you're in a B2B environment, get on a call with like a sales rep, if you will, and try to get more information out of it. So that way you're informed and you build more of that product intuition for this particular product area that you're wanting to kind of go deeper on. Like the goal of a problem is to, one, figure out what it is, first of all, and second is to validate it, right? And so to validate it, what you need to do is confirm your understanding, right? That's why I would mention, do a customer interview, look at the data, right? And make sure that, hey, this is the problem I'd like to focus, because you're going to use this as a way to quantify the opportunity later, which is key. If we look at target segments, right? Again, similar advice, focus on one customer group. You focus on many, you're going to create a diluted product. So focus on one, that's key. And make sure you do a good job with your user discovery or customer discovery, right? So again, do your research, do secondary research, do current research that you have in your role right now, and see if you can find what that highest opportunity segment looks like. How I would normally do it is, if I look at my current customers, right, I want to see how much revenue they are bringing into our business, right, on a yearly basis. And if I see certain customers bringing more than others, I can actually prioritize those problems more because they're going to lead to, let's say, more revenue, for example. So figure out which users and which segments might make sense for the problem area, which ones have more high opportunity. And again, something that's really big, I think, in the B2B space is about TAM, or total addressable market. If you want, figure out what that looks like. What is the total addressable market that you can reach for your product? If it's existing customers, figure out what that TAM looks like. If it's net new customers that you want to bring in and acquire, figure out what that TAM looks like and how much you can achieve or acquire in like year 1, year 2, year 3, right? So it's important. A quick example at the bottom here that I wanted to kind of highlight is if you are thinking of target segments and trying to focus on one group, you need to be very specific. If you look at my example, I say target audience are marketers. If you just had that as an answer, that's not specific enough, and it might not help you understand the problems that a marketer might have, because there's many marketers, right? And so you want to be very specific. So in my second example, I say, hey, an audience that involves digital ad marketers. So now we know that they're digital ads, meaning they launch Facebook ads, Google ads, right? And they manage over 100K in marketing budget. That's very specific. So we know what type of budget they manage, that they're digital ads. I might have even said that, they could be in the US, and now you have a good criteria for your target segment. Now you need to figure out if there's a problem that resonates with them, and then kind of build your strategy from there. Next is value proposition. So to this one, I would say you want to not be so general, but be very specific with what you want to provide for your audience. An example, and we'll go back to, I guess, marketing here, but an example might be, hey, a digital ad marketer wants to be able to A, set budgets, B, track results from their campaigns, and B, select the right criteria for future campaigns. To me, that sounds very specific. Kind of their key actions that they would like to take, and that's the value that your product can bring. So it's very specific. It's not like digital ad marketers will be able to, launch campaigns, for example. Launch campaigns is great, but there's a lot of specific details around launching a campaign, such as setting budgets, criteria, tracking. So be specific. With regards to competitive advantage, so there's multiple types. There's direct and indirect, right? Direct are just companies that look and feel the same in your area of work. Indirect are companies or behaviors that are similar, but in a different industry. So a good example of this might be if we're Netflix, for example. My direct competitor is Disney Plus. My indirect competitor might be YouTube, or it might be anything else that somebody might do outside of viewing a screen, for example, like going outside or a hobby, things of that such. Key thing here to note is what is your competitive advantage? There's something around building a competitive moat. And what I mean by this is if you're already building an ecosystem or some sort of environment, what you want to do is figure out how this strategy can either be still competitive and be in that moat such that it can help, again, your users stay inside your ecosystem or not. And one of the examples here I would say is from my previous role when I was at Dun & Bradstreet. Again, it was a data company and my product was helping marketers, right? For one of my strategies, it was very easy to focus on digital ad marketers because, again, we had basically a data trove. We had lots of information, and these are just kind of fake numbers here, but I'm just saying, 1.4 billion contact records, which is, in a B2B lead gen space, you want to have a lot of fresh contacts so that way you can use that for marketing effort. And so if we already have that, that's our competitive mode right there. We have the data and it's fresh. And so we're adding more value on top of that by, again, helping them target right decision makers with some of this data. That's our competitive edge. So try to think about what that might look like in your strategy when building it out. In terms of pricing, again, you could have different models, freemium, SaaS, transactional, upselling, things of that such. I would definitely think through how you want to think about your business, where you fit, and then figure out if revenue and all these others are kind of a key thing that you want to focus in on. If pricing is not a thing, you can ignore it, I think, but it depends on your business. And then with regards to channel strategies, so you want to focus on high ROI channels. So again, experiment with channels that will bring more ROI. Some are better than others. If you're, let's say, in the B2B space, company generated content is key, blogs and things of that such to drive more traffic to your sales team, ads, any integrations, any inbound or outbound sales. With regards to B2C channels, word of mouth, organic or user generated, right? That's kind of how Facebook works, right? Through referrals, virality, things of that such. And so now that we've kind of gone through all the different facets, and I'm kind of going quick here just based on time, I realize running out of time here. I want to go through a narrative of what a B2B product strategy might look like. And so typically at a company, right, you're going to be having a prompt. I'm just saying a prompt, I guess, for this talk and conversation, but let's say you're given this data and now you need to kind of think of what a strategy is for your B2B company. Let's say that it's a marketplace, right? So you realize that you've received over 150 customer requests, and these were like the top requests coming in 2022. You also have some internal data suggesting something of a feature that should be built. You know that strategic planning is around the corner and that this feature has an estimated impact of 50 million, but a 3+ year projection impact at 250. So there's some weight to this feature and area that you want to build. And then you also notice that startups are starting to come in the space, capturing the market, but you have some stronghold on the buyer side. So these are kind of the prompts to think through what your strategy should be and look like. So knowing this information, right, you need to kind of make a case. And sorry if the font here is a little bit small, but if you go through each of the areas, right, problem, target segment, value prop, competitive, pricing, and channel, the example I want to go through is, let's say I myself am in like a B2B marketplace environment, and I am trying to launch an office supplies program, if you will, right? So for one, in my problem, I've identified the key problems in that, number one, government customers are not aware of, let's say, this type of program. So we want to solve awareness here. We also want to solve lack of category reporting, right? Customers are not aware of, office supply reporting to track purchases. How can we solve these two? And we know the opportunity, it's quite large. How can we do that? And so we then start talking about, the target segment, and we want to focus on these specific procurement officers, right? That already, have some sort of, we have 500,000, for example, year-to-date users in our ecosystem that we can then target for advertising. So that's specific. You want to be very specific with who you're targeting and what their role is, right? So these procurement officers will adopt some sort of behavior or some purchasing behavior in our product. That's what we want to target. I also go down to explain, our municipal government customers made a total 12-month trailing revenue at 1.5 billion in the US this past year. That's a large segment. That's a big market too. That's good. We want to focus in on that if we can prove the rest of this strategy out, right? Then I go through value prop and delivering the right marketing message. So kind of self-explanatory. And then with regards to competitive advantage, ours is that we already have a good data set of buyers. So in this case, government customers. So we can achieve good market penetration in year one. We'd also want to, for example, get lock-in on these new customers. So that way there's a bit of a higher switching cost. So that's another thing that can help with your competitive edge. In my case for this B2B market, right, they can be free to use, no problems. But if you want to enhance it, let's say enhance some of the reporting capabilities that we would like to build out in our value prop, we would then add, let's say, additional functionality and charge extra dollars per user per month, right? So we can think about pricing that way. And then channel strategy, right? So in this case, it's B2B. What can I do to launch in a B2B environment? It could be email campaigns and Salesforce to our existing customers. It could be creating this evergreen content to drive more organic SEO traffic. And that would lead to more folks filling out a form, getting emails, things of that such. Honestly, informing your sales teams about what plays should be done and the value prop and the target segment and the problem. Very much what you have listed here in the strategy, right? You want to kind of convey that to them so that way they know how to talk through it when they do talk with these customers. And then lastly, and this is kind of more product-led growth, a channel might just be in product contextual cues, right? Having certain cues in the product so that way it nudges the customer along the way to A, be aware of the features, which is the problem we wanted to solve in the beginning, and B, know when they need to use reporting and nudge them, right? So I think that's key and important. And again, this is a fabricated scenario, just FYI, no real numbers to either what I'm doing or what I've previously done. So something just to take away on, when you do write your product strategy, actually write it. So try not to do a presentation, try not to write bullets, write out your product strategy in a 1 or 2 page doc. Reason being, it helps convey your ideas clearly, connects them together, and make sure you bring in some of that data as well. Similar to kind of how I had it in a bullet slide presentation. Try to do that if you can, because it'll make it easier then to share it with others. And kind of leading to my second point here, you need to share, you need to have review sessions with your leadership and also with your stakeholders, so that way they understand the strategy. Really getting feedback is important. This is not a silo. You want to keep going through the rounds to make sure you have something that they are aligned with. and the team is ready to build on. So with that, just wanted to kind of leave a quick kind of quote from Warren Buffett, and this kind of relates a little bit to rowing, but sometimes it's not how fast you row a boat, it's how fast the stream is going. What this means is that you want to be essentially going after the right boat, and in this case, going after the right product strategy. And sometimes it might not matter, it sometimes might not matter the team, actually. It could just matter, hey, the product has a good, huge opportunity to grow. That's the stream you want to be on. And from there, you'll win the race.